what you really want to get good at more than anything else is not really any particular topic, but you want to learn how to.
Damn it, Dale.
All right, Dale Sorrento, here we are this week. This is interesting. This will be fun. Get to tie together a lot of stuff. So this week, show 11. I can't believe this is number 11. We've done this 10 times already, Jake.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that, does it?
It doesn't. I think that's a sign we're having fun.
Yeah, maybe. Hey, time blows by. So this week, an interesting trio of agenda items, and they're all related. They've got a thread that ties them, and I'll just say what they are, and then you guys can kind of draw the line in your own head. But the first one, we're going to look at a Mike Benz clip. And I like Mike Benz. I think he was an actual foreign service officer. I think. That's my guess. I don't watch him enough, but I see clips of him all the time, and he's like a great investigative reporter, and he's got something on the Rocky Mountain Lab in Colorado, and he's got a tie to the JFK files, and you're going to love this, about the origins of Lyme tick disease as well as COVID-19. People will love this. Conspiracy theorists, get your best aluminum foil out. You're gonna like this. Get the snazzy chapeaus ready. And then the second one is Jake takes us to kind of a related subject. You've got a great I like the Eisenhower matrix. We'll talk about that. But since everything looks to be bullshit, and we all seem to be finding it out, how do you survive in that? To where do you direct your attention? And so that'll be a fun discussion. And then we close it up with reader viewer question of the week, which is actually on a related topic. Somebody asked if I would talk about learning concepts at the agency, and I won't just talk about the agency. And I have a surprise cherry on top. I don't know if I've told you this story, Jake, but I am gonna give a Dale Saran origin story this week. I am no bullshit gonna spill the tea. Like, this is gonna be like Wolverine's origin story. You're gonna find out what turned me into what I am today. No kidding, and it's relevant to the person's question. So, Jay, tee up that Mike Benz piece. Let's listen to this. This is maybe 3 minutes. It's worth listening to it. But anybody who hasn't heard stuff like this, you are not going to like this. So prepare yourself for some news.
And I said, okay, so look, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it looks like COVID may have actually been made in the same military lab where the Pentagon created Lyme disease. And when I made this tweet, it was because I am persuaded by the central thesis put forward in Chris Newby's book, Bitten, The Secret History of Lyme Disease and Biological Weapons. And the star of that book is a Pentagon military bioresearch lab in Montana called Rocky Mountain Laboratories. And then I saw this from the day before I made that tweet, Halloween 2023. The Daily Mail headline is revealed. Anthony Fauci run lab in Montana experimented with coronavirus strain shipped in from Wuhan in 2018, a year before the COVID pandemic began. 2018, this is exactly when DARPA did the SARS-CoV-2 foreign cleavage site coronavirus work at the Rocky Mountain Lab. And you'll see right here, this image here. This is the Rocky Mountain Lab that shipped in coronavirus samples from the Rocky Mountain, from the Wuhan Institute for Virology, and basically combined DARPA gain of function research, work with the same lab that would later, our intelligence services now believe, release COVID-19. COVID-19, which has the unique SARS-CoV-2 foreign cleavage sites devised by DARPA. What is DARPA? It's the Pentagon's brain. Who funds the Rocky Mountain Lab? The Pentagon. Now, if you read Bitten by Chris Newby, it's all about the Rocky Mountain Lab and the development of tick-borne diseases to drop them against Cuba. And how in the Rocky Mountain Lab, they were going around the Rocky Mountains of Montana and collecting ticks and fleas and small insects.
You can stop it there.
And then super juicing them by putting Willie Bergdorfer, born by Hernan, was dropping or planning to drop ticks infected with things like Lyme disease onto the agricultural workers of Cuba to destabilize their economy. Now, understand the purpose of agricultural sabotage.
You can stop it there. It only gets worse. So it only, believe me when I say this, it only gets worse. So let me use this as an opportunity. You're not surprised by this, Jake.
No.
Like this doesn't. I mean, you're way past that point.
I'm in a difficult position in that, like, I listen to all the conspiracy theories, and I would say I hold them with a very loose. Like, I'm not some sort of like they're making the frogs. I'm not Alex Jones, where I'm like absolutely adamant that this happened, but I'm also like,
Let's put it this way.
Seems plausible.
I was just about to say my Overton window has moved far enough that you won't find me. And so this gives me a chance to wave around. Of course, I'm part of the tinfoil hat brigade. I've been telling people for a long time, in a book I wrote, so the DOD, people would be shocked. I'm telling you, this goes back. I went as far back as I wanted to go until I started to get depressed in researching, like, how far back have we been doing this kind of shit? You know what I mean? Like, once you go like, oh, MK Ultra was from 1953 to 64, you're like, well, shit. And then you start going, okay, 53 to 64. What do you have? How far does it go? And I can tell you there was a Senate committee report done in 94 that was entitled, I can tell you the number, I could look it up in here, but it's basically, it's called 50 Years of DOD Experimentation on the Troops, something like that. It's like we exposed troops. We knowingly exposed them to nuclear test blasts in the 40s. And then by 53, we're doing MK Ultra, where we're giving people, unwittingly dosing them with LSD and mustard gas tests. I mean, they had these things called man break tests. They're like, geez, I wonder how long somebody can last before they fall down and cry. And so what did they do? They brought these guys in and told them, they would always tell them the same thing. It's crazy across all these experiments. They would tell them that they're testing new equipment, uniforms. And so they would put these guys in like maybe a new set of camis and then put them in a room and then gas the friggin' life out of them, until guys are pissing and shitting themselves. They're like, all right, how long did that take? How much it did? So our own government was doing that and has been doing shit like that for a long time, far longer than you'd care to know. Tuskegee goes back to the 30s. And so Benz is putting together what amounts to, out of the JFK files and things he's previously said and some research and rabbit holes he's gone down, what he's connected is COVID-19's origins look like it's right out of that Rocky Mountain laboratory. And then you can pull together stuff, from the JFK files, and you're like, holy shit, we've been trying to weaponize ticks. They're doing it now. They're doing something now with when I see them talk about they're going to vaccinate mosquitoes.
Yeah.
I get really nervous.
Yeah.
I get that concerns me greatly.
Yeah.
That concerns me greatly. So how the hell is all this? And I could rant on this, but it's a subject like, I don't know. So many people are covering this. I don't want to waste a ton of time on it. No, I don't want to say waste. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I think there's no end to the stuff that you can find and that will come out over time. But if you knew what your government done, I'd say there was a book that came out. I'll just mention one, and I can't remember the name of it. It was called like Germs or something like that. And I don't remember if that was Judith Curry. There were several books that came out in the same category right around the same time. And it was part of, there was one that was kind of drummed up. This was the justification for the anthrax vaccine program. And so they do this all the time. You'll see this in popular culture. A book comes out or a movie comes out and it creates a buzz around a certain subject. And then it's not long before the government's using that as a basis for some piece of legislation or something else, but or it's something that happens or happened. But like there was a book that came out that evidently turned Bill Clinton around. It was a fiction book about somebody using biological weapons on New York City or something like that, and that book started driving policy such that Bill Clinton, at least that was the story, that Bill Clinton set up all these things like the Chemical Biological Incident Response Force and all these wide-ranging protocols and all of that would eventually be what they would use when COVID hit. So all that stuff, it didn't just come out of nowhere. COVID-19, COVID-19 was a 25-year in the making infrastructure buildup, all built out of moral panic over germs. And the reality is that we're the only ones who can do this shit. We're one of the very few countries that has the technological, the scientific capability. So there's almost nothing. Now you can always do crude weapons, like germ warfare has been around since, they were firing, they would take diseased cows and fire them in catapults and, like, right. I mean, like the French and, like fetch a lavage, they go boing, and they would fire dead, diseased cows in mass, dead animals into castles that were being sieged.
Or they drop them into the wells? Yeah,
they all try to poison the wells. I mean, that's why those things are built the way they are. So this is not an unknown or a new phenomenon, and it's never really gone away. But we're at the top of the heap of making this shit. And it's also wouldn't you know, it's also wonderful for the pharma industry. So all of this is interesting, and it'll make you a little queasy, and you might wonder why the hell doesn't the media cover this? And this brings us to kind of like, if this stuff is going on, like, why don't we know about it? This is crazy. It's criminal. That's why you don't know about it, and that's why it's classified, because it's criminal. And so you brought up you asked a question of, with all this stuff and the stuff we talk about, there's kind of a meta question to be asked. And so give us that, Jake, on relevant to this JFK stuff and how the media works. What are we missing?
And since 2019, I think a lot of, the scales have fallen off a lot of people's eyes, and they realize the media is, patently dishonest, that you really can't believe anything that they say, which is a welcome relief, I think, for people like you and I, who probably since our youth have been going, these guys are lying.
It's the Leo DiCaprio meme.
Yeah.
Like, that's bullshit. It's bullshit. That's lying.
That's I know something about that, and that's not how that went down. So this week we had a large kerfuffle in the news media about the attack on the Houthis, which the information that was released seems to be a complete nothing burger. It's been 72 hours, which is a great. Nassim Taleb has a great thing where he talks about, the daily news, 95% of it is noise versus 5% is signal. And if you wait a year, it's still only about 50-50 noise to signal ratio in the news. So, we had this great dust up about like, we've released war plans. And it's like, well, no, actually we didn't. We just, hey, is everybody okay if we go forward with the plans that we already had, which is entirely different. And in that same time frame, so like I can't even imagine the number of hours in media ink that's been spent on this nothing burger. At the same time, in Congo, 70 Christians were beheaded,
Yeah.
and there is zero time spent on that. If that were 70 Israelis, if that were 70 trans kids, it would be nonstop, wall-to-wall media coverage of it. And I'm no great, I'm not here as like advocating for the Christians, but it's like, hey, you got a country where they specifically targeted a religious group and are wiping people out. And we've got nothing
Yeah.
to say about it. That we're not
Yeah.
even going to like take a peek, not even a hint. And
The-
that
the-
shows like what is important versus what is urgent. And I think many times when we're talking about like importance, the way that I look at importance is first time frame. Does this going to matter in 5 minutes? Is it going to matter in 5 years? Nobody's going to remember this signal leak in 5 years.
Right.
In 5 years, those 70 dead people are still going to be dead.
Right.
And,
Right.
and then it comes back to our values. Like what is it that we hold important? Is it freedom? Is it security? Is it financial lagris? Like what is it? What is the ultimate goal that we're trying to accomplish as a country, as a people?
Right. Hey, Jay, we got to pop up the graphic on this. You've got this wonderful. You sent this. I looked at it a little bit. So this is really to the question of, where do you direct your attention?
Mhm.
Like we now are in this attention economy, and maybe we always have been, but I think we were more a consumer economy, and then what came along with that was advertising and marketing and all that shit. And the media is just a part of that. You might as well just think of the media. It's paid for by a large part now. It's driven by pharma. So you might as well just consider that what's being stuck in front of you and what's vying for your attention, whether it's off of this thing or on the idiot box or in the computer, whatever it is, in your email inbox, that stuff is all vying for your attention. Everybody kind of gets that now, but you have to make some decisions, like you're saying, like how do you, where do you direct your attention, and in what what's the order of importance?
Yeah.
And how do you do that? And this isn't a urgent and important at the top left. There is like an interesting kind of, everybody gets that. People get this. And by the way, this is all tied to the stuff you and I talk. You used that word already once, plausibility. This is all tied to the stuff I'm writing about now for Broken Science. Used one of those pieces this week. I wrote on plausible reasoning. I'm working off of an outline. I'm going to write a whole course basically out. But this is the same thing. We all do this, but we don't think about it. So this is kind of it's an important way to start thinking about how your own mind works, or at least should be. It's a way of putting at least a conscious thought into where you direct your attention, so that it doesn't get stolen. You get nickeled and dimed by your attention.
Well, I'm gonna say that if you focus on the not urgent and important stuff, a lot of the urgent material will eventually evaporate because you've gotten ahead of it. And one of the things I noticed when I was in corporate America is that the people who were constantly working on urgent stuff and constantly had crises would get promoted, even though as someone who was working on things that were important but not urgent, there wasn't a lot of fanfare. There wasn't like, oh my God, we saved the cat from the tree moment. Just reliable, consistent results didn't get you promoted.
Right.
Creating a little chaos.
Yeah.
Creating a little like, hey, we almost didn't make it. It's like, all right, well, you're going to get promoted. And it's like, all right, well, you are literally promoting, disorganization within your organization. And there's a ton of that within, that is one thing that they love to do in government is like, hey, never let a good crisis go to waste.
Yeah. No, this is a really good, it works well. It's obviously kind of a corporate-y, kind of thing, but it's got a good way of thinking it. Look at something as opposed to nothing in terms of to where do I turn my attention? And this is almost like, I think of this almost like you almost want to do this like you do with, some people do like food elimination diets, or you do like any kind of diet, or whatever you're doing, zone or whatever it is, you can almost think of this the same way. It's like, it doesn't necessarily need to be perfect, but at least it's something.
Well, it's also, let's look at it for relationships. That like,
Yeah, right.
who are the most important people in your life? When is the last time you actually talked to them?
Right.
And it's like, well, I've got these other people over here who are like clamoring for my attention that I have to manage them and deal with their things. And if you go, hey, I would rather spend more time with the people that I actually care for and enjoy, and then start minimizing those people who are constantly having crises and coming in for attention. And that'll create a much bigger uplift in your life. And you can do the same thing with news and the other projects and priorities in your life. Like, what is it that is actually important for you?
I don't know.
Most of us, at some point as an adult in my mid 40s, I realized that like the things that I thought were important in my life were things that had been assigned to me by society, mom, dad, culture, and then went, hey, this is complete hokum. I don't think any of this is important. This is
Right.
how dare you bullshit me into believing that these things are important that aren't. And at first you're offended, and then at a second point you go, well, I'm responsible for my life, so I need to make that decision. But certainly nobody teaches us as kids like, hey, you have values, you have a purpose to your life that you're trying to achieve that isn't just floating around on a lazy river and hoping a warm jet squirts you in the cock every once in a while.
Right. Or you get, or you hit the lottery. And I'll tell you who, my first introduction to these kinds of concepts, and you can think whatever you want of. Do you remember Stephen Covey?
Mm-hmm.
Habits of Highly Successful People or something.
Love Stephen Covey. We're both coming of age. We both came of age when Stephen Covey was a big deal.
And I had the Covey planner and everything, man.
Oh, absolutely.
I was
the Covey planner, the Franklin planner, but
I've been through all of those at one point or another, and I would recommend anybody try that stuff. It's a which is a nice way of getting us to kind of maybe this is a nice segue. So look, it's something, pick something, but you have to think about you in some ways all of them recommend you've got to take some agency over your own life. In many ways, a lot of what we do is, like you said, it's a great point. You get stuff handed to you as a kid and you accept it. And then you get to a certain point in your life, in your adult life, and you're like, oh shit, is that really what I want? Or is that really important to me? Or what are these things? Like, do I really believe that? Do I feel that deep down inside,
Right.
So whatever you use, I would recommend all of those things, all that self-help stuff. The good stuff, like the enduring stuff, even Carnegie, Napoleon Hill, all of that stuff. Highly recommend all of it. You can't read enough of it, and you'll quickly get a sense for what's dreck and what's not. I was a big one. Did you ever do the self-talk thing? Did you run into that self-talk? Like how you talk to yourself is crucial for your long-term. Yes. You know that because you gave me when we were talking about intentions, write it in the present tense.
Positive. Yeah, the whenever I hear somebody talking about like negative self-talk or even rumination, I'm always like, ooh, don't do that. That's terrible.
Yeah.
Like once you give up negative self-talk when you see it, you're like, oh, that's really offensive and smells bad, and I don't want to be around.
Right. Smells bad. I like that.
Yes.
And by the way, you can be driven, and you can be, I don't want to say hard on yourself, but you can do it without getting down on yourself. You know what I mean?
You can have high standards and still have grace for yourself.
Yeah, right.
Hey, I know what and some people, there are areas in my life where I have very high standards for myself because I know I'm capable and competent in those areas. And there are other areas of my life where I'm like, I better outsource this as quickly as humanly possible because it doesn't matter how much I practice. I'm going to be remedial. Like we all have those things in life. Well, you should just practice at that. And it's like, no, man. Like if I worked really hard and I was super diligent and I really brought it to this, I'll rise to the level of like D+.
Right. Of just barely sucking.
Of just barely something because it's not my thing. I can't
Hey,
do it.
the only class I ever failed, the only academic subject I ever failed of any stripe anywhere was first or second grade penmanship.
Yeah.
My handwriting was atrocious,
I
and
I
it's still
I
shit now.
still
Right?
write like I'm holding a crayon like this. Like you'd think like thank God for keyboards. I
Yeah.
would if we had to write by hand like they did in the old days, you would never get anything from me. It'd be like,
Yeah.
telegraph type.
And it's so funny because my mom was originally left-handed, and in the nuns back then, some people may not believe this, may not have heard this little tidbit culturally, but so that they would smash your hands if you wrote left-handed. The word for left is even like in Latin, sinister means left and all this shit. But so the left was just viewed evil, and so you had to write right-handed. So my mom was a lefty, and they beat her knuckles until she learned. And the amazing thing, she's got beautiful, beautiful cursive, handwriting. She writes beautifully with her right hand. That's not natural. She was originally a lefty, and they took it away from her. So for those who don't know,
I was at the tail end of that movement. I think I was originally a left hand. I learned to do it right hand. Eventually broke my hand in a fisticuffs, and then learned to write left-handed again.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, yeah. So anyway, the last part of this that is kind of tied all to it is somebody asked the question, wrote in this week, which is Dale, Jay sent this. Somebody sent it to Jay. Talk about your learning concepts at the agency. What general ideas or concepts they taught you can use for or concepts that they taught you can use for everyday life.
What did you learn at the agency that you can use in your everyday life?
Well, I'll tell you I got a couple funny stories, and then I'll take it out of the agency context and tell you one other thing, and it's related to what we were just talking about, self-help stuff. But I'll give you the Dale Saran Wolverine origin story. But first, I'll say about the agency. The one thing they taught me that's pretty useful, and I can't really tell you, but knowing when you're being followed, surveillance detection, being able to tell when you're being followed is a pretty cool skill to have. And so, like, one time I was walking with my daughters. We were walking around Boston, and I was showing them just some little things you can do. And I'm not talking about the shit like trying to look in windows and glass and catch reflections of people behind you kind of shit, because that's obvious. But there are subtle things you can do to be able to determine whether you're being followed or not. And so I used to teach my daughters that when we were like walking around the city. So that's maybe a little weird, but I always thought it would be a useful skill for them to have. So that was one good thing. But you learn a lot of stuff there. The agency is they're like the Navy SEALs in this regard. You can get any school you want. If you can make a justification, they'll pay for it and send you to a school. And so I've gotten a chance to do a ton of, and they have some really good courses. They get a really good shooting course. They get some fun courses. Great. Best driving course I've ever taken. One of the best courses ever I've taken was a driving course that they do. So that was very useful for everyday life. But I want to step away because it could give you, it's not that I can't teach anything here, but I want to talk about
jump in on that real quick, having not been an officer. From the outside looking in, I would say it's more of a selection and recruitment process than what they taught you. I think one of the things that you would have to have as a CIA officer is the ability to relate to people and relate to them quickly. Like you have to have those interpersonal skills, and they can't teach you. They can teach you some presence, like charisma can be learned, but it can't be taught. And you have to have that charisma. You have to have the ability to think on your feet. You have to have the ability for critical thinking. John Kirikow was talking about another officer that he worked with one time, and she was going in, having interviewed like 4 or 5 hour talks with somebody with an asset, coming back and saying no actionable intelligence. And then he went out with her one time and said, "Hey, we've got 5 different points here that we need to send off. We have cables that we need to send off about this." And it's like, hey, you're not cut out for this life. So there is some of it which is like you have to have that skill set going in. Like, are you a critical thinker? Can you be independent? Can you be charismatic?
Sure.
Um,
Well,
and then, of course, all of those skills do transfer. High emotional intelligence, that's going to transfer to real life.
yeah. So I'll say that's a great. There is a lot of it that's selection, but I'll say this: that there's a year long. Well, you're in training for a while, but it's a long course that essentially amounts to what I would think is a graduate degree, probably master's equivalent in human psychology.
Hmm.
And so much of what you do, and you do it both practically against actors, role players, you are put in scenarios with, you kind of live in this, there's a big chunk of training that occurs kind of in this artificial, but very, almost like a movie set in some sense, like where you're living in a giant artificial world that's created and kind of overlaid on your environment. It's and with role players and all that shit, and instructors and but they do, you need both introverts and extroverts, and not everybody is, like I was always an extrovert, but I'll say this.
You can be an introvert and still be charismatic.
Right. And so there are a lot of things you can learn, and there's some great things you learn, like elicitation techniques, conversational techniques. I mean, and a lot of it just gets integrated into who you are, But I'll say this, a lot of that you can pick up there are like business intelligence courses, that you can find. And I'll tell you this, the one thing that helped me, and I wouldn't say the agency taught it to me, was that being a trial lawyer taught me, which is interviewing witnesses, which is, very much similar skills. So I had a lot of what I needed already. Like you said, I might be an example more of a person who got selected rather than they had a thought that they were going to give me A, B, or C, for the task that, I was kind of more picked as a tool for a particular task than.
I think that CIA officers are kind of like top coders. That if you've met anybody who is just a superstar computer coder, they've gone to school, they've learned it. They were a superstar coder before they went to school. All they did was get polished. And that, if you don't have the ability to relate to people and think independently, you have to have the raw material, and they're going to polish it up. They're going to make you better at it. They're going to give you insights that you didn't have before. But if you don't have the juice, you just don't have the juice.
Yeah, I don't know. That almost seems to want to give the CIA credit. I don't want to give them any at all. Not anymore.
Well, I'm not
think
giving them credit.
Even on the selection side,
good coaching is good recruiting.
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, you brought up Kiriakou to me. I looked him up, and I don't know if we overlapped but I didn't know him. But we worked in the same, same place. We belonged to the same structure. So, but I do remember he was the one who came out, and that was, I think his revelations came out while I was still there. I don't remember. Maybe after I just left, but it was.
I think you had just left.
Yeah, but he had some fascinating. He was the guy who came out. It's one of the best. It's one of the funniest stories. It's not entirely true, but it's kind of true. But because Abu Zubaydah was waterboarded a bunch of times, and so, but I don't remember if it was he or Khalid Sheikh Mohammed or whoever it was. But one of the 9/11 guys got waterboarded, and before he was waterboarded, he basically was like, "I'll tell you nothing, and never," and then I think Kiriakou might have told his story, but then he got waterboarded for like 45 seconds, and then they put him back in his cell, and then the next day he came out and said that Allah had come to him in the night and told him that it would be perfectly acceptable if he told everything, that it would be all right, and that he would be perfectly allowed to tell whatever, it wouldn't matter. He could speak about the brothers now. And I was like, yeah, Allah showed up, huh? But a personal visit and told you could talk. You don't have to endure that again. So anyway, that's one of my
the God of water.
Yeah, one of my favorite kind of waterboarding stories. All right, so this comes to related to this. There's a meta concept about learning, and I'm going to tell you the origin story. You'll like this, Jake, if you haven't heard this before. But I kid you not, this is a true story. So when I was a kid, I was precocious, and in 5th grade, do you remember when you got to go to the library and they taught you how to use like the Dewey Decimal System and the card catalog and all that shit?
Mm-hmm.
So we, we're in this old. I went to middle school in the same middle school my mom went to. So it's this old rickety public school building, and I remember the library teacher started out by saying, the reason that you need these card catalogs, the whole raison d'etre of this whole setup is that she's like, it helps you find things. Nobody can read every book. And so we were in this little library within the school, and she's like, nobody can read any book. And I was a real precocious kind of kid. And one of my classmates, and I was also a pleaser, raised my hand. Yeah, I know that, And one of the other kids was like, well, Dale could. That I could read every book, right? And it's funny because as soon as she had said it, I was in the library and I was an avid reader as a kid and could read fast and would remember it well. Mm-hmm. And I looked in the library, in the school library, and I looked around at all the walls, and she's like, nobody could read every book. And I looked and I was like, I could read every book in here. Like I had this serious thought in my head, like, I don't know. Yeah, it'd be a while. You'd be a little monkish, but a couple of years, you could read everything in here. Wouldn't be, I had like a smart ass punk kid, And then they took us. So then they took us to. We had a field trip, and we went to the big public, like downtown library. We went to like the Providence Public Library, a Boston Public Library, a big, giant public library, and I'd never seen anything like that. Scope and scale. And I looked around there, and I was just like, oh my God, like, holy shit. Like
my bluff has been called.
Yeah, like somebody called my bullshit. And I remember being like genuinely kind of overwhelmed and kind of disappointed with the realization that, there's you're not going to know it. You can't know it all. You can't. You just can't do it. And that would I don't know. I remember that being a moment of like, damn. And I remember thinking to myself, and this is the lesson I would share with everyone is, or if you want to know why I am the way I am, my first thought was, well, if that's the case, given that that's the reality I'm up against, what you really want to get good at more than anything else is not really any particular topic, but you want to learn how to learn. And in other words, you want to be really, really exceptionally good at learning, just as in kind of the meta concept that if you could look at yourself and if you could step out of yourself a second and just note things like what things do I pick up quickly? What things do I not pick up quickly? And in some ways, it's sort of like taking the CrossFit approach to your own brain and sort of saying like, yeah, you get a lot of benefit out of improving your weaknesses. Work hard at the things you suck at. You might only get to D, but you'll get more improvement there. Greg it was one of his great lines. I love this from CrossFit. He said, you'll get way more health benefit, fitness benefit out of doing the thing you hate and that you suck at than you'll have to put in so much more in terms of hours. If you're a good 10K runner, if you already run a good 10K, you have to put in like hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours to knock 10 seconds off because you're already at the far end of of the curve. And whereas if you suck at something, you get like 1 for 1 for every hour you put in, you're better. Even if it's, you know what I mean? And so, and then there's other things like you talked about before. I mean, we already kind of touched on this. There's some things that you just realize like there's no amount of time I put in there is going to be useful to me. It's wasted time. You know what I mean? It's going to be lost to me. And I've only got, we all have, you also have to view, it was an important thing to pick up. 168 to me is like the great leveler. 168. Everybody goes, what? You know what that is? Hours in a week. 24 times 7. It doesn't matter, king or fool. Everybody gets 168 hours of the week, baby. And, you've got to poop and sleep and, do other things. So it's like you really, there isn't as much time to be productive as you think there is. You've got to be efficient. And that means knowing how you grok things.
I don't think I'm going to disagree with you on this, but I think I'm going to refine it a bit in what you're saying, that I have a. Am I echoing?
No, you're good.
I have a personal pet peeve with the grind culture.
Oh yeah,
And,
that's
and the reason that I'm going to bring this up is that, like, there's a difference between practice and performance. And that when I was an athlete, I spent 75% of my time in practice, practicing the things I was not good at. Hey, here's something where I'm short, here's something where I'm deficient. Let me spend my time working on that. And then
woof.
no podcast is complete until a dog barks.
An animal shoot. I was say my cat's been great. I've been so fortunate.
So 75% of my time, I knew I was going to spend. Hey, I'm doing something that I'm not good at. You have to have diligence. When it came to showtime, I didn't do any of that crap.
Oh yeah, there's that.
And way too many people get sucked into. I've been practicing this thing. I've improved so much. I'm going to do this. And I used to have guys who would compete with me who would go, I'm going to show you what I've learned about what you're best at and beat you at it. And I'm like, hey man, I've forgotten more about that than you'll ever know, because I've been doing this since I was 2. And it's important to realize, is this practice? And that practice is all about diligence. That when you're practicing piano, you are practicing something that you have to think very hard about, and you have to be very diligent. And then when it's time to perform, there is no more diligence. It should all just be flow. It should be easy.
I do.
Like if I'm doing a difficult thing live,
it better be second nature.
Correct.
But I would just say, techniques for learning is my best would be for that question. And Jay, while we're talking about piano and learning, I'm going to put you on the spot. Have you been practicing Honor Me, that song that you sent me the link to? I hope you've been practicing that, buddy.
I have.
Oh, you have?
Yes. I have.
How far?
I'm pretty good. I'm like halfway in. And I'm like, all right, yeah, it's getting good. It's getting good.
I'm pretty much through page 1. I'm pretty much through the first page. I was going to record it and send it to you today, but I was like, wait.
Oh, please do it. Yeah.
Hey, by the way, since we're coming to the end here, we're about to leave. I will throw out a Greg reference. I was at his place and I love playing. He's got a beautiful Yamaha grand piano, but he bought a beautiful Steinway. He's got on order. Oh, have you seen that?
I saw the Instagram post, but no, I haven't. It looks beautiful.
Oh man. Oh, I can't wait. This is the nice thing about having it as a friend. It's only a matter of time before I get to sneak over there and play that thing. When it shows up, it's going to be in the new place. But anyway, practice is a lot of, you can accelerate the pace at which you learn if you're conscientious about your own self and giving yourself, I love the line you had, Jake, earlier today, which is have some grace with yourself. And if you can acknowledge things like, hey, I'm not bad at that. I'm not like the best in the world or whatever, but I do that well. And I pick up that thing. If you can be cognizant of your own habits, both good and bad. And I think,
I would say one of the things that it's certainly been true of me, and I see it in other people, that our gifts are so easy for us that we're oblivious to them.
Yes.
So it isn't until someone points out, hey, that's super easy for you. And you're like, yeah, because it's super easy. And then someone else is going, no, it's not. That's not easy. It's only easy for you. It's like, well, why can't you just do the thing that I just did? And it's like, well, we don't know how you did that. Like, and you clearly can't teach us because you don't know how you did it.
Right. And that is, and you've had this too. We've talked about this before, but it's in jiu-jitsu, you always say, like, you don't really know a move until you've tried to teach it to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And then you suddenly find yourself going, when the guy goes, wait, how'd you do that? And you're like, and it comes down to something like really subtle that you don't know. Like you twist your hip a little bit, when you're maneuvering, and you never know. And then, somebody else is asking you a question. How did you get from point A to point B? And you're kind of like, well, just sit like this, man, or do this. to the extent that you can reverse engineer your own self, you'll go a long way towards learning how to improve what you got. And I guess which is sort of a great point to wrap it up. And I think you and I are both the kind of people, and hopefully for listeners out there, if there's anything I could offer you, it's this. Always seek self-improvement. You don't have to beat yourself up, but you ought to, I guess fundamental to my belief is that I'm here to learn.
I think we're here for
that's how I got through hell. That's how I got through Buffalo. I mean, was asked, what's the lesson? That comes from you. I mean, I get that.
I think we're here for a life of fulfillment, and there's self-actualization, which is, are you achieving your full potential? Which I think is what all of us want to do. Is like, we want to achieve our full potential. What is the full potential that you have? Can you live that? And then comes transcendence, because self-actualization is actually fairly selfish. And that once you achieve that, then you want to give that gift to others. And fulfillment is a wonderful, succinctly, it is, am I doing work that fills me with energy that other people appreciate?
Yeah, I'll tell you that and it's in play too. It's the reason I continue to play ice hockey in my 50s is not because I'm going to make, and we joke all the time. We go out when we're playing. I play in an old man league. I play with kids, whatever. And we always joke that we'll come out on the ice. It's like a 10 o'clock game, 10 o'clock at night game. There's nobody in the stands. We're in this empty ice rink. It's cold. Bunch of 55, 60, 70-year-old guys out there playing ice hockey. Somebody like, some guys are going hard. It's like, hey, are the scouts up there watching? The scouts? And there's a sort of like, they don't do it. I mean,
I used to ask guys at the gym, did you win practice today? Did you win practice? Oh, good job. Good for you. Let's raise your hand.
Yeah. So, and it applies that, if there's CrossFit listeners, this is on Sevy's channel. And so a lot of CrossFitters will hear this, to your point, it shouldn't try to find the joy in it, when you're doing it, while you're doing it, you
enjoy the process.
Yeah. If you're not, the grind thing is like, what the grind is? It really is. It's a modern form of like the monks flagellating themselves in public. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's how much
Python taking the 2x4.
Whap. With kaboom, Domanasis Requiem. So. Yeah, like
I'm going to touch on that grind thing. I brought it up that if you see a machine that's grinding, if you have a grocery cart that's grinding, you realize something is off and you need to change the system and the structure. But if it's you that's grinding, well, that's good job.
Yeah. It's you can't. It is just, and we've all done it, and you've all done it, and we've done it. It's like, what it's like doing. It's like thinking that you'll get a better result if you push down harder with a pencil. You know what I mean? It's like, I know if I just
I've never done
that. It will make a better, that's not, that lead's not gonna.
I'm gonna develop that concept further. Thank you. I'm stealing that. There will be no royalties from me when I write a book about that. But yes, thank you.
Pushing down harder on the pen.
Yes.
All right. Hey, that's all we got, Jay. And now I'm worried. I thought I was going to be way ahead of you on that piano piece, and now I think I might be falling behind.
Damn it, Dale.